I'm gonna say play less removal in Brunhild, play more ways to win the game.
Hey there, everybody! Welcome to the Teacher's Lounge. We are discussing the fact that I apparently don't know how to play Brunhild very well.
It's okay.
We are back, and Frank
It
is...
depends a lot on what you're playing against, right?
That's very true. So, Frank and myself and Ryan walking in and Brandan Bremont are here once again to talk to you about the wonders, the majesty that is Force of Will. We are glad to have you here. As always, thank you guys already for anticipating my needs and telling me how the audio sounds. Thank you so much. So today, today's topic, we have two. We have the upcoming level 0 online judge test, which is brand new and what people have been asking for a very long time. So we're going to kind of talk about, we have a person who is attempting to study the judge test on his stream earlier this week, an L1 judge, are you still an L1, Brandon?
Former L1 judge.
A former L1 judge, and another L1 judge who's going to drop down to an L0 after this season because he never judges and just streams. So we have a lot of experience to talk about, and we want to be able to pass that on to you guys who might be interested or just wondering about what it means to be a judge, how you prepare to be a judge, and what it, you can expect in the process, what to do to prepare, and what you can expect to do as a judge. So feel free to ask us any questions that you have in the chat as we go.
I have a question.
Talk about it. I have an answer for you, Ryan.
How the hell did you guys actually read the CR and not fall asleep? Because good golly gosh.
It's not. Wait, what? It's not even dense legalese.
I was gonna skim through it's only 60 pages, and I know the back half of it is just keywords. Let me read through it on stream and just kind of explain each individual section. And some of those sections were just
why do you think Why do you think the original Ruler School series was broken into 3-minute chunks? You're not.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to just ingest it all of it all at once.
I passed the L1 test without ever reading the CR. It really isn't actually necessary. As long as you understand the game, a lot of the lines in the CR are just clarifications on rules that you intuitively know. You don't need to know that the green will symbol, what it means and stuff, because you just intuitively know that, and there's several lines describing what each of the will symbols means. A lot of it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I will agree that especially reading through it, there are some areas that are much higher return on investment for the actual reading than others. If there's any section in the CR that you should read through the entire. It's nearly a page and a half on playing a spell. It sounds really simple. And that whole there is it is a 15-step section. It is in depth.
All right.
Okay, but I will.
You should go on the Force of Will judge page, scroll through it, and see every CR reference that a judge uses to answer a question, and read that CR bit. There you go. And you get a lot of what really matters.
Yeah.
So let's kind of go around the room before we dive into too deep. So let's kind of go around the room and talk about, I guess, from the different experiences of interactions with the process to becoming a judge, and kind of takeaways to maybe why you think being a judge is important. We'll kind of spin off from there. So Ryan, you are the only one of us who's never actually been a judge, and you've been getting into this idea. So tell us a little bit about your experience as someone who has never judged before, trying to pursue that title now. What has it been like for you, and kind of what are some takeaways that you have for it that maybe you can pass on?
So when I started playing Force of Will, I accidentally read the entire CR because I wanted to know, and for the record, I started playing Force of Will when Bahamut was the #1 deck. My first tournament was GP Houston, and I read the CR because I wanted to know if I could banish my 0-attack Rook Egg for Bahamut, and if I attacked Leviathan, would my Bahamut deal any damage to an opponent Resonator? Turns out the CR does not very adequately answer that section, so I had to go into the Facebook group to find out the answer to that. The answer is no, it doesn't deal any damage no matter what. But I did end up reading the CR at that point in my career. And since I had read the CR, I decided to take the judge test at GP Houston. I did not pass, unfortunately. So I've taken
Season 1 was rough.
Yeah, it was. I'm told that it was a much harder judge test at the time.
That was before we had the English one, right? That was the one that I helped write, I think. Not the one that you took, but the one that came after that was the one I helped write.
Yeah, it was pretty cumbersome. There were a lot of questions about Cheshire Cat because it's got hexproof. It's got when this card dies, shuffle into your deck. It's got automatic triggers. It's got so many relevant things that like half the questions about Cheshire Cat, and it was a Bahamut format, and I just didn't even know what that card goddamn did. So like, it just hadn't popped up on my radar, so I didn't pass the judge test. But yeah, I just did a read through of the CR on the stream recently, which took like 3 hours. Unfortunately, I was hoping it would take like an hour and a half maximum.
Not happen for you.
But the main thing that I was like really interested in reading through it again, there's like a lot of like specific rules that are defined specifically for specific interactions.
Sure.
And I hope I clarified most of those. But the one thing that I think is like important to know is like there's a section in the rules about continuous effects and the way that they apply. And it's literally just a step by step process saying if there are multiple continuous effects applying at the same time, here's the order they go in. And I didn't know that existed at all, like that there was actually a part of the comprehensive rule set defined that tells you how continuous effects apply. But now I know it, and it's completely irrelevant for 99.999% of your game states. But if you ever want to know if you've got like an Alice's World of Madness out and you've also got out like a buff effect, like there's a specific order that goes in. So now I know. That was my experience.
Or if you ever get called to a table to answer what happens when someone uses Charlotte's Water Transformation magic while the Palace of Light Diversity Veil is in play happens. Yep. I think that is actually still the most interesting judge call I have ever had.
What happens, Frank? Just out of curiosity.
Basically, the thing you are targeting becomes a 400/400 bear, regardless of how the palace shifts around it. In this specific instance, they were doing it to a giant pumped, I think it was the lowly spirit bug. So it had 2 types, and it lost those types, and then readjusted anyway because of how Charlotte's Water Transformation would still be a 4/4, but then everything else shrank.
Because you lost the typing.
But the card itself doesn't recognize its own type becoming a bear to reapply the kingdom?
Correct, because the kingdom is time stamped before water transformation magic.
So it won't like rebuff it after you make it a 4/4.
Is the other issue with that issue or complication with that section is that whole layer lists out how to apply a single effect, and then you time stamp them on top of each other.
So there's that as the fresh eyes. We'll go with Bremont, who's next. Well, we'll kind of go around because Frank has the most experience, so we'll go from kind of like least to most. So, Brandon, your experience with being a judge, what? And now having stepped away.
Have the most experience. I'm not really sure, but I was a Magic judge for 3 years before I came to Force of Will, and
I'm sorry.
It's better than being a Force judge, let me tell you, by like leagues. But the Magic rules are fundamentally very similar, in especially in things like how a spell resolves. It's very similar to Magic. The way priority works is fundamentally very similar. And so when I took the judge test, this was Atlanta's GP last year, or after Vingal 3. I turned in a deck list that had some issues on it, and so I dropped from the event after round 2. And they let me judge and take the judge test because I had nothing better to do. And I passed it, and it was basically just entirely on the back of knowing how to play Magic. And so if you're out there listening and you know the Magic rules very well, I encourage you to take the Force Will judge test because you're about like 5/6 of the way there already. And then as far as my experience judging, as I kind of alluded to, I didn't really take the judge test with the intention of being a judge. It was kind of just an afterthought. And so I never really judged again until I had judged ARG Vegas, which was a fun little shindig. And I also judged the Texas GP 2 years ago with Ken Tober. And that was a lot of fun too. But it's not really something I'm going to do terribly often, and certainly won't again. I'm not a judge anymore, mostly because I came to that realization that I just wasn't going to do any judging activities. It was a little disingenuous since I don't really keep up with the rules, and I'm certainly not as versed as a lot of the other judges are, so I'm just not doing that anymore. But it's fulfilling. If judging is something you want to do, I definitely encourage you to do it. The judging community is great. I love basically every judge in this game. They're great people. So definitely pursue that.
I do want to like kind of chime in here because I am a competitive player that I do feel like knows the rules very well, and like the incentive for like judging versus being competitive, it's always been kind of like how good do I feel how good do I feel I am at the game versus like what is the comp for judging. And I just feel like I think the judge comp is getting better and better from what it was. It was always kind of like you just get like one promo, and it's an exclusive promo, and it's probably worth like above $200. But like, I don't know, I'm decent enough where I'm like consistently able to top 8 events, so like it's just more worth for me to pursue that. But like if you consider yourself a player who studies the game, and for whatever reason you're just not able to like, if you just don't like playing meta decks, but you play the game for the fun of it, like build your decks that you enjoy playing, like play those at events with other players, but then judge, because like your knowledge is going to be so beneficial to the judge community, even if you're going to just play a deck that's potentially suboptimal.
Yeah, for sure.
You would also be surprised how often knowing like weird off-meta decks is relevant to like judging.
Yeah, because those are the people that get the judge calls called on them more than anything, I feel. It's like, yeah, what does that card do? I've never seen it before.
To go to my experience, I started playing Forceful right at the beginning. Right at the beginning of it coming here into the U.S. Did YouTube content for it when it started, and then got really heavily into the community, and we had the really bad translation test for Season 1. So then we made the rules. It became known as the Rules Advisor test, which is essentially L0s, and I helped write that. That was a lot of fun to write and then take at Chicago when I ended up judging, so I passed that and ended up getting an L0. Then there was a bunch of big long story that I'm not going to get into, and I didn't have an L0 status anymore. So then I took... I'm not going to share that story right now.
That's for the Teacher's Lounge after hours.
That's for the Teacher's Lounge after
Subscribe to our Patreon to learn about the after.
Oh, goodness gracious. So, and then I took the judge test again, actually this past year, and I passed it at GP Atlanta, the GP with the $80 Uber ride. That was super fun. But one of the things that I think is important to, if the game is important, if taking the test, one of the things that I found to be really helpful is to draw out the board states. You're allowed to make whatever kind of marks you want on the test. So like I find it way easier to help myself visualize the question if I draw out the board state like actually in front of me. So that's a tip that I can pass on. Just like read the rules, sure, but then when you're actually reading the questions, if you're a visual learner like me, just draw out the board state. Like, because I had some questions that I took and I was like, man, I have no idea what the answer to this is in first read. And then I went, wait a minute, I'm just going to draw out what it's telling me. And then the answer suddenly clicked and I got it right. So that's kind of my takeaway tip, that if you are practicing and you're a visual kind of person, like, do not feel afraid. In fact, it really helps, I think. Just draw it out on the test because you'll get a lot more answers that way.
There has never, I don't know of a single test that's ever not liked you showing more work. This isn't related to judging. This is in life. They always appreciate seeing more work.
Focus back in there, camera. So
you
Frank,
just force palm your camera?
I did.
It worked though. I mean, are you going to complain?
So
Nope.
Frank, you are currently in L1. You plan to continue being in L1, I believe.
Yes.
And so from your perspective, for those, what is the purpose of judging? Like, why is it important? Why should people do it? And kind of what is a tip that you can give to people who are trying to take this upcoming L0 test?
So as far as like the purpose of judging isn't like, why should you want to, or like, why are judges here? The reason is pretty simple. You want a good environment for us all to play games, and we want these games to be as fair as we can make them. And so the whole purpose of judges is to help everyone play and help everyone have the fairest and most fun event they can. And that's honestly like why, well, that's not why I first got into judging. The first one I judged was Ohio, and they did not have enough judges, and I drive around with the scorekeeper everywhere, and he was basically like, Frank, I need a favor. I don't want to have to try and scorekeep this event understaffed, so get over here. So I got over there. But then afterwards, I enjoyed it some, and I continued doing it basically because I enjoy the game. Like, I thoroughly enjoy going to Grand Prix. Like, even when I don't do well, there is like a style of game that can only be had when you are at like not necessarily just a Grand Prix level event, but an event that's at that type of like play and enforcement. And because I enjoy it, I need there to be judges. Because I need there to be judges, I try to contribute to the judges.
There you go.
So would you have any like point to those who are planning on taking the judge test, that like a tip that you can have for them to prepare?
The best, I mean, other than like not even necessarily just reading it, but like familiarizing yourself with it, the purpose of being an L0 is specifically to be someone who is familiar with the rules, so that there's a quick and easy reference for like local players and for stores and stuff to be able to answer questions on the fly. And so the most important thing we're looking for there is just, do you have a basic grasp of Force of Will's rules? And so that's sort of what I would focus on. It's like, you want to, like, if you've got it in you, read through the CR. If not, like, familiarize yourself with it. Like, familiarize yourself with how it works. Hit some of the sections that, like, might be a little bit harder. But, like, know that that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to show it a broad, and, like, know that, like, we're not, like, it's not going to be trying to trick you with, like, oh, in section 7.A.E, what's said there. It's going to be giving you a lot of information to work with, and just trying to see that you understand the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who are wanting to take it, the judge test the information is on the forceofwilltcg.com website. It's FOWTCG.com. There's a tab on the left that talks about judging, I believe, if I can remember correctly, and it has all the information. So it's talking about, it'll give you the details of when the event is going to be taking place for the online test. They're going to be doing the online test once a quarter, I believe. Is it once a quarter or twice a year? I think something like that.
I believe it has been said that it's once a quarter, but don't quote me on that.
So it's once a quarter. You get a chance. So if you don't pass it this time, then take it again in 3 months. But this is a huge opportunity. It's a huge chance for Force of Will to expand its judge base, which we happen to have not had for a very long time. So go ahead and there's no real harm in taking it. It's free to take, and you might as well do it.
Yep. I have a question for the people in the judge chat. Is this open book, quote unquote, because it is an online test that you're taking? So like, there's no real moderation.
So the idea is that the L0 is supposed to be someone that can go to their locals and make sure that the rules are run properly. So as such, at your locals, you will just be able to pull up the CR. So if you can use that to determine the right answer, totally fine. That's all the L0 is expected to do anyway.
That was my understanding. I never saw it posted anywhere, but I was doing my review. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's open book because it's the L0 test is like your locals guy. Yes. So they're not really testing your rules knowledge. They're testing your ability to navigate the comprehensive rule set to find the correct answers. So therefore, it makes sense if it was open book. Like the test is saying, here's this rules interaction, what happens, and then you look in the CR to find the answer. That's exactly what you'd be doing at your locals. So that's not
understand when we say like this is what's going to be happening at your locals. Like think about how when you like all the questions you hear at your locals. Like you'll occasionally hear like the really weird, what if this happens and this happens and this third thing happens all at the same time. That happens very rarely, but a lot of the time your locals is just, oh hey, I cracked this in the pre-release for the first time. What does this do? Like that's really like we're trying to cover the 90% questions with the L0 status, and like if you are pretty comfortable with it, use the tools you've got.
Yep. Gotcha. And so with that out of the way, let's talk card evaluation. So Force of Will is having a lot of new players come into play. We have new frontiers, and at this point in time, a lot of the community in various different places have really started to get a taste and get more and more experience with the different formats that are available in Force of Will. New Frontiers, Wanderer, Cluster, Epic Stories, the fan format. Some people are playing Genesis, which is the other fan format. In fact, Europe is actually picking it up to try to make it an official format, which is pretty cool. And then Draft and Sealed. And it doesn't take much to realize that a card that is good in one format is not necessarily good in all formats. And so what I'd like to do is kind of just have a discussion, and feel free to kind of mention some cards maybe in the chat that you think you'd like us to kind of talk about our thoughts. But all of us have lots of experience in a lot of the different formats that are available, except for Genesis. So we'll talk about what we're looking for in different areas of different cards for different formats and kind of what sets them apart. Frank, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, specifically in terms of, because you kind of are the creator of Epic Stories, and from my experience, there are a lot of different kind of, and Brandon definitely jump in too, there's a lot of different things that break it out and make a card that is really suboptimal in New Frontiers or Constructed, where you're playing this 40-card deck, suddenly much better in a deck of singletons. So kind of speak to that, maybe even throw up some example cards from like New Frontiers, and I'll try to put them on screen for people too.
Easy example, because this is a card that is like worlds apart in the two different formats. It's Unyielding Dragon Lord Ragnarok. I'll give you what it does real quick, just so that everyone's on the same page. It's blue and 3, blue and 3, so 6 total for a 15/15 flying resonator dragon. And it has, when it enters the field, if it was played from your hand, reveal cards from the top of your deck until you choose to stop, or you reveal 2 cards that share the same name. Then put all the revealed cards in your hand. And it has discard 7 cards, destroy target non-magic stone entity. In New Frontiers, this card is wildly unplayable. Like, we have a reanimator rule. We have a ruler that does reanimator stuff in the format, and no one's even mentioned this card's name. I didn't even think of this card.
Whoa. You can't reanimate this card and have its effect happen. It's only if it's played from your hand. Second
I know.
I'm just saying.
No, but like no one's even mentioned it to be given that warning that it doesn't really work.
That's fair. I agree with that.
Whereas in Epic Stories, the card has some difficulty playing it, and that triple blue is not free if you're not a very low color combination deck. The card is just absolutely one of the best top ends you can get if you have access to blue. Like, you're going to obviously, like, because of the rules of the format, you're going to just draw exactly as many cards as you want. But then also the secondary mode, where it discards 7 cards, destroy target non-magic stone entity. It's pretty useless in New Frontiers. Like, that's just an awful rate. But like, you're going to have enough stuff. The format naturally encourages enough graveyard synergy that you're probably just going to come out ahead if you draw enough extra to just do it once or twice.
We lost Ryan. He'll be back.
Okay.
So you also have a good amount of experience. So Brandon, you also play a significant amount of Epic Stories. Anything else that you would kind of add, or like a particular card that you're thinking of that, like in New Frontiers or Constructed, is like just not going to be a card that you're looking at?
So an abstract, Frank gave a very good example of a card that's good in Epic Stories, but we can kind of talk about why. And that is that, your life total is a lot bigger in Epic Stories, which means that the games are naturally going to go longer. Aggressive decks don't punish you as hard, so the curve sort of ramps up a little bit higher. You get to stabilize a lot easier and play out bigger things. So things like 6-drops just get to resolve. Secondly, answers are a lot less efficient, mostly for the same reason, where things like Lorite are very good in the format, but you only get 1 of them. So very niche answers to powerful effects don't exist as often, so things like Ragnarok can get away with existing. And in general, people are just a lot more combo focused, so the quick cast ability to destroy things is very good. Having general answers to any entity type is good. You want your deck to... So Ragnarok fits a lot of these narrow categories, where it's a big card that you're not going to get punished by an aggressive deck for. It hits a lot of different things that you need to be concerned about in Epic Stories, and the answers to it are much slimmer than they would be in New Frontiers. Beyond that, the effects that win through ways other than life total, for instance, locking your opponent out of stones, are much more powerful in Epic Stories. Things like Grubelesta's technique comboing with the Arla ruler are much more powerful because they don't care about life total. Strategies that don't revolve around a very specific card are much better because you only have 1 copy of those cards, etc., etc. So it's like these are the different angles by which you can adjust your evaluations up or down of certain cards.
So what if you take that same idea of adjusting your evaluation of a card up or down and apply it to a sealed or a draft format?
Oh, I do love sealed and draft. So you obviously have to adjust almost everything down in draft and sealed, or up, actually, depending on your perspective, depending on the angle you're looking at it from. But most cards are playable in draft and sealed because your deck just needs to find playables. So when you have 25 cards and you only drafted 40, then you need to, at least over half of the cards that you looked at have to be puttable in your deck. Have to be able to be put in your deck. And so
have to be puttable in your deck. Brandon around 2018.
So things like Venom and Scorpion, which aren't playable in New Frontiers because it just doesn't do enough. It doesn't have enough of an impact. Is still better than the bottom percentage of cards in this set. So Venom Scorpion actually becomes very good in limited. Cat Ninja Scout, again, obviously we'll never see play in New Frontiers, but because it's better than the absolute bottom of the barrel of this set, it becomes playable. So that's kind of how you start thinking about draft. Although, one way to shift things down in draft, so this is an interesting example. In Winds of the Ominous Moon, not Winds of the Ominous Moon, Time Spinning Witch. No, yeah, Time Spinning Witch. Lorite was actually egregiously unplayable. Like, you wouldn't play Lorite even if you were a wind deck and you had it, just because there just aren't enough effects that Lorite hits, and your deck needs to have enough of a board presence. Like, you need to have cards that actually affect the board, and Lorite doesn't. So Lorite is like very bad in that set. Plus, because of all the Scheherazade stuff, Wind was just unplayable in that set anyway. So like Lorite was egregiously awful, even though he's the best card in New Frontiers. So like that's one of those ways that evaluations shift up and down.
Sure.
On a note of on that shifting up and down, it also part of it becomes what percentage of cards are playable in a format. Like in New Frontiers, would you guys say I would say it's a fairly safe estimate that only about at a competitive level, only about 10% of the cards see play.
Yeah, I was gonna see 10 to 15% are
I would say less than
the pool.
But yeah,
I figured Ryan was gonna be on the less than side.
So I mean, you think about it, only a deck has 40 cards, and you out of those 40 cards, you only actually have between 10 and 15 cards that are in that deck, and then you only have 4 or 5 playable decks, and then even if all those decks are completely different from each other, there's no overlap in staples, then you have 4 or 5 playable decks, which is 10 to 15 cards per deck. So at most you have 5 times 15, which is 75 cards, and one set is
150 roughly.
Yeah, so half of one set is a playable format, and you have 5 sets. So right now we have 5 sets with 75 playable cards at maximum. That is 5, 10. Yeah. That's 5%. That is the absolute maximum. Is that 5% of cards are playable?
Yeah.
And if how egregiously you think things are playable, if you only think 4 decks are playable, then yeah, that makes sense. But
then it gets worse. It gets worse when you think of how much overlap there is between decks. It gets worse when you think about how many playable decks there are.
It also widens some once you start to include sideboard cards, which tend to be smaller numbers, and a sideboard will have relative to its size more cards. But
it widens when you start to dip into tier 2 decks instead of that playable. It really depends.
But what I was getting at is that's our metric for New Frontiers. We know there's about this percentage of cards that will ever really matter, and to a certain extent, a lot of the competitive players can tell if a card will ever have the potential to even try and break into that number.
Sure.
You break into a format like Epic Stories, and because it's a little bigger, because it's a little wider, the pool gets bigger. So we start to add in some of these big splashy effects that were either too expensive or just too late in a format that's as focused as that one. And because it gets wider, it adds more variance, and as we get less predictable, it widens a little further. And so you get this sort of ballooning effect there. And then sealed, because things get so much wider, I think, because Brandon and I used to grade sets on sealed playability, and I think we probably gave maybe 20% of the format, or 20% of a set would get D or less.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about where it should be too. I mean, when you think of the math of the number of cards that I said you were going to acquire, and sealed is completely different. But actually, let's use sealed math. You're going to look at exactly 60 cards, and you need to make a 25 card deck. So, if you're in well, it doesn't really work out like that. If this was Yu-Gi-Oh, this would work out like this. But since you're much more color restricted, you do want to say about 20% is not going to get in there at all.
Yep.
So then let's talk about that. What is it about a card, in any particular case, what's an example that you guys think this is a card where in the narrow card pool would be absolutely unplayable, but what gives a card some strength, more of a reason to look at it, more of a versatility when it becomes more of an open, wider format?
So I think that in general, with the absolute exception of Epic Stories, because of the fact that you have a larger card pool and a lower so in New Frontiers, you only need to play 10 cards, because you have even in Wanderer, where you have access to every card in the game, you have a 40 card deck, but you have a play set is 4. But in Epic Stories, you have a 60 card deck, and you have to play 60 different cards. That is 6 times the number of cards that you have to play compared to Wanderer with the exact same total card pool. So more fringy cards get more playable, and there's also the difference between like where singleton card, like the whole singleton format just like affects playability of some cards where you can't combo as efficiently. But when you look at Wanderer versus New Frontiers versus Sealed, like the defining characteristic of what makes a card playable is, in my opinion, simply efficiency. Like what makes a card broken in any given format is just you say, okay, you look at every single card playable in the format and say, okay, what is the most efficient card that you can do? What is doing the most amount of things for the least amount of mana?
How much do you plus?
Yeah, so I think that like defines every playable card in New Frontiers. Like it's a little bit awkward in New Frontiers because the best deck, in my opinion, is Time Spinning Witch, and then I'd say, okay, Distortion of Time says my opponent doesn't untap. What is the value of that card? Evaluate that in comparison to the rest of the format. And ultimately, you don't even need to evaluate it because the only counter to that card is Lorite. And then because there's only one counter and because it's only one color, you don't even need to start to think about like how much. Like imagine if Lorite was a colorless card. Like would Time Spinning Witch still be the best deck? Like would Time Spinning Witch still be the best deck at that point? I have no idea, but I don't need to think about it because the only deck that beats me is green. And I'm sorry, when I say the only deck that beats me is green, it means that the only deck that can even interact with what I am doing is green. That de facto makes Time Spinning Witch insane, and then you only have to think about your green deck matchups because you're just going to beat the red decks, you're going to beat the white and black decks, like et cetera, et cetera. So when you're looking at Wanderer versus New Frontiers versus Sealed, you're looking at what cards don't have any counter, and that's again what Brandon was saying about why Lorite is not playable in Sealed, where he's the best card in the game in New Frontiers. Like he doesn't counter anything. But in New Frontiers, he counters everything. So you're looking at what cards don't have any counters is like your number one thing. And then like secondly is what is the most efficient thing. And if the card game was designed well, then you wouldn't even be thinking about what cards have no counters because everything would have at least some counterplay. But because we're playing Force of Will, and for the past 3 years, we've always had some goddamn strategy that has no counterplay. So you're just looking for what's the most efficient. In Wanderer, Gretel is very, very efficient right now.
Brunhild.
Brunhild's very good.
Gretel.
We just had a Wanderer tournament in Spain, but nobody even came to the tournament with Brunhild, so it's a little bit skewed the results in my opinion. But like there was a bunch of like combo decks and Chimimi decks with Captain Hook where you're just attacking resources and there's just like the counters were not played. So
I watched that deck. I watched that. For those of you who maybe don't know, there's a Brunhild deck that just they call it Brunhild's World, and it's just how much you want to play Guibers. But like the deck, because of the new enter effect rules with Gretel, literally can just go infinite on Alice's Worlds on like turn 3. Just like
doesn't even play Guiber.
Yeah, no, the ones that is the most efficient doesn't even play Guiber because it doesn't care because it's just going to take infinite turns. So. Yeah, it's a little.
The most efficient card in Wanderer is like Gretel and Adam Brawley, and because Gretel's so efficient, it makes Adam Brawley and Cheshire Cat so efficient, and like that those 3 cards become the most efficient things in the game, and the format is worked around that. But even at this Wanderer tournament, where there were not any Brunhild decks. Like Gretel was just like, I'm a 2-mana card that calls a stone, and then like I'm fodder for other effects, and like there's like torrent stuff going on.
Yeah, it maximizes the value.
Game.
It's like an easy it's like an easy +1, if not a +2, if not a +3.
Yeah.
So there's like no downside to Gretel. I always used to when I played card games, and I don't hear it as
back when
much.
I played card games. Now that I'm a streamer, back when I played though,
Back when I played that, instead of just talking about it. When I like the knowledge that I always looked at card analysis when I was actually doing legitimate like in-depth card analysis, especially back when I played Yu-Gi-Oh, I thought of everything in terms of the plus and minus. Is this a plus? I don't actually hear it talked about or used as language from Force of Will players very much, surprisingly. Like, we talk about, like, the value and stuff out of it, but, like, the actual mnemonic of talking about, oh, this is a +1, oh, this is a +2, oh, this is a -1, I don't actually hear that a lot. But, like, coming from the Yu-Gi-Oh days, I remember having entire conversations with people that were just, oh, yeah, this is a +1, this is a +2, this is a -2, this is a +1, this is a +1. Like, you don't even look at the effect. Like, you don't even talk about what the effect is. You're just talking about it in terms of pluses and minuses.
I do want to hop onto that because you are 100% correct. Where like literally in Yu-Gi-Oh, because there's no mana, all you care about is card advantage. Like, that is the only resource in the entire game. So in Force of Will and in Magic, like, you can talk about, like, and again, time splitting, which is the best deck in the game, and it's because you tap down your opponent's mana. It doesn't exist in Yu-Gi-Oh. You can't tap down your opponent's mana in Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, that resource is, like, abstract and hard to define in Force of Will in terms of how good it is, but in Yu-Gi-Oh, it doesn't happen. Like, all you care about in Yu-Gi-Oh is how many cards do I have, how many cards my opponent has. Does this card that I'm playing for free give me more resources than my opponent? So it took me a long time to transition as a Yu-Gi-Oh player into the MTG Force of Will scene, because, like, the concept of tempo just blew my mind. But it changes up a lot in terms of card evaluation.
Yeah.
You'll also hear less. You've also probably heard that less recently, because for the player base that comes from Magic, like, and because of Force of Will's overlap with Magic, some of the same stuff will apply here. In the more recent years, like, straight card advantage has sort of become not less important, but less singularly important. Like,
oh yeah, I agree.
Tempo, managing the battlefield, simple, like, rate and when you can do things have all become, like, enough more of the game that just card advantage isn't enough, because, like, we've had multiple, like, enforceable, like, insane card advantage spells that just saw no play because they were just, like, they failed on some other metric.
Right. This is why everyone needs to play Limited more, because Limited, even in Force of Will, is entirely pluses and minuses. What I was telling you earlier about Lorite not being playable, it's because he's a -1. He doesn't pay for himself in terms of a card.
He is a
like,
-1.
We talk about how like, draw 2 cards can be basically as expensive as you want it to be, and it's playable in Limited because the entire format is just card advantage. So if you like that, if that's the kind of gameplay that you like, I encourage you to explore more Limited, because it's the best way to play Force of Will anyway.
I do enjoy Limited greatly, but I definitely think that I also think that Limited is an excellent way. And if you're looking for, like, a step, so kind of like when Ryan was talking about how it took him a long time to adjust, I think Limited and Force of Will is a good way to kind of start, like, easing your brain into it a little bit differently, because, as Brandon says, it is a lot about card advantage, so a major thought process is still about the pluses and minuses, but it also starts to get you thinking about the will system, the resource-based system. So, like, you get this kind of, like, really nice interplay between the two, and then you can kind of start, like, taking off. Because I've seen people who jump in from, like, Yu-Gi-Oh playing into Force of Will, and they've sent me, like, deck lists, or, like, people at my locals have shown me deck lists, and they, like, show me the deck, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, this is great, this is a +1, this is a +2, like, they're talking in that language, and then I'm like, yeah, these are not good cards. Like, this is, I mean, sure, it's card advantage, but, like, what is it actually doing? Like, what is the actual impact? Like Frank was saying, in terms of tempo on the board state, those kinds of things. And they don't get it. Like, they actually kind of struggle with that a little bit. But Limited is a good way for them to get a taste of it and start recognizing that there are different ways to look at cards, and then you can kind of start easing it into your different way for card analysis too.
And
that's a good point, Brandon. Thank you.
Yeah, even if you're not coming from that same background, one piece of advice I will give you is try multiple formats, because, like, each format has something that it does a little different and, like, makes you do a little better to succeed at it. And so, like, if say you're used to playing New Frontiers, going to Limited is going to make you realize more about, like, combination of battlefield math and card advantage, and it's going to make you see them, because, like, there's overlap enough that you're going to be comfortable and be able to play and be able to just perform the game. But then you're going to start to see where, like, maybe you haven't practiced this specific thing enough, because New Frontiers didn't stress it hard enough to make you, like, really get good at it. Or, like when it comes to evaluating cards, there is no format that will make you, like, have to change how you evaluate cards more than a format like Epic Stories or Genesis, where, because you have to dive so deep into the card pool, you have to stop looking at cards as individually, like, oh, this is the most powerful. Like, you can't just do the easy this, and this, because you get very disjointed decks that don't work. You have to start being able to see what is making them good, so you can start to group cards together. And then, like, it both makes you, like, able to evaluate cards more flexibly, and it'll also make you able to, like, see what decks are doing a little bit more quickly.
There you go.
Absolutely. So play all the formats is the lesson takeaway here. It helps you get better at learning cards.
That just because at least splashing other formats every once in a while will make your primary format, like, less stale. And then you'll play the game longer and have more fun.
For sure. So before we get into our game for the night, someone did ask us Ryan Lilly asked us to evaluate the Lost Homes ruler in reference to New Frontiers. So this is Gil Lapis, he who something's the taboo.
Oh yeah,
controls the taboo.
So
black-white ruler, he judgments for 5. So black-white ruler, judgments for 5, or black-white and 3 colorless. Has energized black-white, and he can pay for historicals with any color. And he says when you play a historical card, you put a fate counter on a card you control, and then you can flip him over. And he says on the backside, stones you control can tap to produce any color. He's a 10/10. He can pay 0 and sack a dude, right?
10/12.
10/12. He can pay 0 and sack a dude to give himself a bunch of... Yeah, go ahead.
Flying!
I wanna go first because I already know Brandon loves this card.
Read the card for us, Brandon.
Oh, he's
got 1 Banished Resonator. This card gains swiftness, imperishable, or precision until end of turn. God's Art, Twist of Fate, 0. Destroy all other non-magic stone entities with no fate counters on them. Then remove all fate counters from all entities.
I like this card except Lorite.
So yeah, when we talk about card evaluation, we talk about like how efficient a card is. This card is insanely efficient in the sense that God's Art just like is such a good plus. Like your opponent can never overextend into this, but then you think about how one of the most playable cards in the entire game is just a 4 of in every relevant deck, and you cannot you cannot do like your most powerful ability and suddenly your entire effectiveness just falls off. And that is like why this card is so good up until you include like Lorite, because like Lorite is just like this format warper where it is like the just most relevant card in the format in terms of like how you build your deck. Like, okay, I'm building like this, like am I weak to Lorite? Like does my deck do things without Lorite? And for the most part, you're really not too worried about Lorite because it's only like you can only play 4 copies of Lorite. So if your entire deck is 40 cards of things that get countered by Lorite, it's not that big a deal. But when you include one-time effects like God's Art with Welser, with God's Art with Distortion of Time, with God's Art with Gil Alhamot, it's Alhamot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you include cards like that, like the fact that you can only activate them one time and all that your opponent has to do is save Lorite until you activate that effect to completely cancel your game plan, like that format defining card suddenly makes certain decks unplayable. So if you want to talk about like whether or not Gil Alhamot is playable without Lorite, that'd be interesting. But
I definitely think as someone who's played against Gil Alhamot in a format,
I actually want to fight back real quick.
So
fight away.
Before that though, as someone who's played against Alhamot in a format that didn't have Lorite in it, it is not fun. Because it's just like doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what you do. If you overextend, I'm gonna nuke it all.
Good. Okay. I thought you were saying it wasn't fun to play.
No. It is not fun to play against. It is not fun to play against him because
what format ever existed where this was around but not Lorite?
The Jeremy Franklin birthday format.
Oh, okay.
He's not kidding.
I want to play that format.
I'm not kidding. That was a good format. I enjoyed it. But anyway, so this is like a side note. I actually think that that Lorite shouldn't be able to stop God Arts. He does, but for answering Time Spinning Witch. No. Here's the thing. He has to be able to because Time Spinning Witch is a thing. Don't get me wrong. So like, let me preface with that. But I also think that's why Master Runes. I like that they've transitioned to Master Runes because Master Runes are kind of like a God Art. So like that Lorite can't answer because I think that they created God Arts and then they created Lorite and it was like, oh wait. So these God Arts kind of just became like generic activate abilities that suck now. But anyway, that's my point there. Frank, you wanted to fight.
So back on topic.
Yeah.
I think this gets at one point of card evaluation that like we didn't get to go over, and I was going to stop you if you tried to go onto the quiz game without going over this. And that like we sort of went over how powerful a card is or how flexible a card is, but we also didn't talk about the environment around the card because there are a lot of cards that get wildly different in environment. And like Ryan gave examples why he thinks this one is terrible in this environment, but I would actually give you another example. I think this card is actually much better than he's given it credit for. This environment it has nothing to do with his God Art. It's everything to do with the ability on his front side, which is you can play historicals with attributes of any color. So this is a ruler who gets in a single color stone format access to 10 cards of pretty wild flexibility and at least
very good.
at least 2 to 4 of which are like notable. Like actually, no, 4 of which have seen play in like top decks in the last GP. Blazer, Viola, Saturnius, and where was the fourth? What was the fourth one?
Venus is a one.
Oh, no, Venus was the other one I was going to say, which didn't necessarily top, but like
and then Rachel is good too.
Multiple times.
And Rachel.
The kill spell and Jupiter are both like not unplayable.
Yeah. And so you get access to this wide variety of cards that you 100% can never fail to cast at the point you want to cast them.
They're so good.
And so that gives you total freedom to do whatever else. Like you could decide like, hey, I don't care about black and white and I'm never going to flip him. And you could just build the rest of your deck whatever you want and just have perfect mana. And like outside of her, like the Goddarding distortion of time being very powerful. One of the like underrated things about Time Spinning Witch has just been, or not underrated, but like underspoken parts of her has been, she has the best mana in the format. Like because she uses the statue so freely, she gets access to multiple colors easier. She gets access to mana easier. And like this guy does something very similar. And so he all of a sudden gets a lot better. Like I doubt it will top a GP just because he's sort of playing in some like, and some of these cards that I said were very good were specifically in Time Spinning Witch. So like he's sort of playing in the same like area she is, but he's doing it very powerfully.
Yeah. To speak real quick to a chat comment we have, Jamie Andres Gomez, I can't pronounce your name and I apologize. Right now, actually, outside of Fluorite and Seven Disciples, like wind is not the be-all end-all color right now. Sure, it's Fluorite, but like
it's Fluorite. It's only
like,
Fluorite.
It's just Fluorite. Fluorite is the only like be-all end-all wind card right now. Wind has actually lost wind core by itself has lost a lot of the power cards that it had in the past. Don't get me wrong, Chimimi's still good, Gil is still good, but like wind as a whole is not as oppressive as it used to be.
Deck though, like the Chimimi deck is just a lot of bad cards and Fluorite and Fluorite's Disciples. Like that's the whole deck.
Yeah, like
I agree.
Like at the GP, I played a deck that was not particularly soft to Fluorite, and I ran into a couple Chimimis, and it was bad. Like I had one of them openly just do force meditation into evil elemental mana because he was to the point of I can't win the game if this doesn't resolve, and so I lose whether or not you have it. Please don't kill me.
Yeah.
I killed him.
So I do think that if Fluorite disappears, that I think that Arena is still a playable color because it does have powerful cards like Forest Meditation. It does have powerful cards like Fairy Spell. And I think that green like really falls into line if Fluorite doesn't exist, but then accidentally Time Spinning, which is like literally unbeatable. So like my perfect world is that we get a colorless answer to Distortion of Time, and then we ban Fluorite, and that is like I don't care about anything else that comes out in V2. If that happens, then Force Will is fixed.
Last Days of a Powerless Dragonoid isn't even played right now. To talk to Jamie, like barely.
Yeah.
Certain decks will have it in their sideboard pretty notably
but
because
it's not
they don't
in the main.
I didn't side it with my Time Spinning Witch. Like because Kirik just felt so free. I just like.
Can I go back to this just really quick? I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Hit the last card.
I got distracted, but yes.
This is extremely important that it is very flavorful that this card gets countered by Lorite.
Oh my god.
That's absolutely true. Lore-wise, that is super flavorful.
All right, that's all. All right.
Okay. I do want to say, okay, so does Gil Alhamat's Goddard have to be a Goddard? Read the card. It says when you activate the ability that you remove all fate counters from anything you control. Why is that a Goddard? Like, I don't think there's any way to reapply fate counters.
No, but then
because please understand, if it wasn't a Goddard, it still says other. So you simply go infinite times. I would like to destroy everything but Gil. I would like to destroy everything but Gil until there is nothing left but Gil, and you win because there's never anything left but Gil.
That sounds great. That sounds uncounterable by Lorite. That is exactly what I want to happen.
It's uncounterable by anything. This would be the best deck with absolutely no competition. Oh, actually, no.
What do you mean? No, if you're ruler, it's for 5 mana, doesn't it?
Boys, let's stop, and instead let's play a silly game.
Right? It's 5 mana to flip it. I think that effect should not be a Goddard.
Infinite times castable. You're insane.
Yes,
you're
because
insane.
It would kill everything. I think that if your ruler,
how good is a ruler that has no text and just judge?
Oh, wait a minute. No. I'm following now. I was thinking. Never mind.
It would destroy all your own stuff too, Ryan.
I see what's going on here. I know. I'm following. I was thinking that you could like only do it like the one time, like do it multiple times in the chase.
I'm so confused.
I don't know what Ryan was thinking.
No.
Anyway,
Yeah, no.
let's go ahead and jump into our game. I won last week when Frank and Brandon weren't here because I beat Stephanie Shaw. So I have picked.
It was close until like the last two cards. The super hard cards. Like let me break this down for those of you who didn't watch last week, and for Frank and Brandon who didn't watch last week. It was like Stephanie Shaw takes an early lead, and we're talking about like easy cards. Then we get into like some medium cards, and neither of them know what's going on. And then we get to what is my opinion, cards that I would never fucking know in my entire goddamn life. And Jeremy's like, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one. Stephanie's like.
There you go.
Comes from like 1 to 5.
I'm going to lose this because I do not know names. I'm so bad at names.
Okay, here we go. First card. This is I've got lapis cluster stuff.
Raising hand.
What? Yeah.
Raising hand.
Hands down. Hands down.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm watching this. I'm watching it. So I have 5 cards from Ray cluster, 3 cards from lapis cluster, and 2 cards from New Valhalla. Okay. So here we go. Here's our first one. Magic Shield Warrior. Oh, Frank. Frank had it first.
That is the 2-drop 0/15 golem with mobilize 2?
Close.
I have some of those numbers wrong.
Brandon.
It's a 2-mana 0/8 with mobilize light.
Ryan.
It's a 2-mana white and 1 0/15 with mobilize white.
Ryan is the closest, so Ryan will get the point. It is a 2-drop 0/15 1 white 1 colorless golem with mobilize 1 colorless.
Give me half a point. I didn't earn
Half
that.
a-
I
half a
completely
point.
got off of the back of those guys.
Okay, half a point. We'll give half a point for Frank because he was just off on the mobilize cost, and we'll give half a point to Ryan.
That's fair.
There you go. Card number 2. The Coral Palace.
Oh, I know this one. This is my favorite card.
Brandon,
Okay.
go.
Dang it. I know this one
Blue
too.
for an edition that says blue 2 : draw a card.
Done. Piece of cake. Brandon Bremont takes a stunning lead. Brandon Bremont takes a stunning lead with the Coral Palace.
That is in my top 5 favorite Force of Will cards, though. So
Here we go. Jumping to New Valhalla. This is Caliburn, the Sword of Judgment. Ryan?
It is a rune. It costs 4 mana. One of those mana is blue, and it says, "Oh fuck!" I know it. Is it target or is it? No. I know. It's no. I know.
Ryan, I believe in you. I'll give you 5 seconds to get started. 5, 4, 3, 2,
Target
1.
2 resonators. Return one of those resonators to your opponent's hand, and they banish the other. That's not right, but
That's pretty close. Brandon, can you beat him?
okay. So additionally, it's got Divinity 3, and it says target 2
Yeah, it does.
resonators. Your opponent returns one of them to their hand and banishes the other.
Point for Brandon. That is correct.
I don't get half a point. What did I get wrong? I said target 2 resonators.
You
Return
can't
one
say
of the hand,
Divinity
banish the
3.
other.
That's an important part of runes.
I knew it was a rune, though. I said it was a rune.
You also were wrong on its cost, Ryan. It's 2 blue and 2.
It's
It's 2 blue and 2.
He didn't
blue
say
and
the
2.
cost.
I didn't say that either, to be fair.
Half a point for each of you.
Okay, I'll take that.
Here we go. Here's our next one. Wise Man of Amonsul.
Oh, this is
Brandon?
Yeah, okay.
This is green for a 4/4 that says reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal an elf from among them, and put it in your hand.
Hold on. Where is my Discord suddenly gone? Say that again, Brandon?
It's green for a 4/4 elf that enters the battlefield and reveals the top 4 or 5 cards of your deck. Pick an elf and put it in your hand, and I think it's 4.
He
It
said
is-
4 the first time.
It is that is close enough that I will give you the point. It is the top 3 cards.
Wow.
And you reveal an elf and
Wow.
put it into your hand.
3? How bad is this card? I'm like buffing
Terrible.
in my head because I think
Brandon Bremont with a 2.5 point lead, rocking it
You
out. Said he
you
was
said
gonna lose.
So you said Amonsul, and I was like, oh yeah, it's the village of Amonsul. I have to like go through the green
giving me
cards.
2 cards that are like amazing in draft. So
Okay, here we go. Guide to the Ancient Ice Wall.
Oh, I know this one too.
Frank.
This is blue and 2 for a 600. Honestly, forget his toughness.
Just say 600. You're probably right.
It's a
600, 800, and whenever you cast a blue chance, target resonator becomes unblockable. I hope I'm not confusing it with a different card.
That is close enough that I will give you the point. The only difference, the only thing you got wrong is that it has 1,000 defense.
Dang it.
So Frank coming in.
I said
So
Frank gets 1.
Frank gets 1. So the current score is Ryan. Have you been? So 1 point, 1.5. I think it's 1.5. 1 point for Ryan, 1.5 points for Frank, and 2.5 points for Brandon.
Wait, Frank, I have a point somewhere. I missed.
Yeah,
that.
he got it at the beginning, first card.
I got the other half of the one you have.
I thought Bremont got it. So is Brandon at 1.5?
Brandon is at 2.5. Frank is at 1.5. You were at 1.
I missed an entire point somewhere, so just ignore me. All right, carry on.
Here we go. Nightmares of Relay.
Oh.
Brandon Bremont.
Red, red, red for target J-Res gets +10, -10.
Sorry, boys. It's unwinnable at this point.
I know
You
hard.
make the mistake of continuing to pick limited all-stars. That's what kills spell.
I just picked random cards.
Wasn't even in the draft set. That was in the red starter deck.
He was.
So Bremont's at 3.5 points now? Oh my god, I give up.
We have 4 cards. 4 cards. It's still anybody's game.
His camera's losing its mind.
It's 4 cards. 4 cards left. Here we go. Zhang Zia the Fisherman. Ryan Miles.
Okay, it is 1 blue, and it says put the top card of your deck in your graveyard. You summon
I would like to steal.
X
nope.
counter. Okay.
Frank, you may steal.
It's a blue and 2 for a 700/700. Reveal the top card of your library. Create a XX blue and black illusion token where X is its cost. Then put it in your graveyard.
It's a fantasy.
You remember the chant version that doesn't have a body attached.
It's a fantasy.
You remembered fishing. Brandon, he is not quite correct. If you can get closer, you can have a point. You can still have a point from him.
Everything Frank said except it's a fantasy.
Frank, you get a point. Frank is the closest. It is Zhang Zima. It is a 2 blue and 1 7/7 myth. When this card enters your field, put the top card of your deck into your graveyard. If it was put into the graveyard this way, put an XX Water Darkness Fantasy Resonator into your field, where X is the card's total cost.
Frank, that's exactly what Frank said, except
I said you reveal the top card of your deck, then make it, then put it into your graveyard.
You mill.
Come
on.
Basically, because
I gave him the point. Point.
It's worth noting when I revealed would not get stopped by barrier seal, and the actual card does.
Yeah. So Frank is at 2.5.
Sounds.
Frank is at 2.5. Ryan's at 1. And Brandon Bremont is at 3.5.
Come back, boys. Here we
go. 3
go.
cards. Here we go. Raft Downstream. Ryan.
Rune, Divinity 2, Green 2. Reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. Put 2 of them into your hand.
I can steal.
I will give Frank second shot because he had second hand up.
No, I don't have anything to make it more clear on whatever Ryan missed.
Brandon.
Exactly what Ryan said, except it's Divinity 3.
Ryan, you get a point. Nobody can get closer to you. Ryan, it is 2 blue. It is 2 blue and 2 Divinity 2 quick cast. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Reveal up to 2 wind cards from among them and put them into your hand.
2 wind cards. Oh, my bad.
Ryan, you are the closest. You get a point.
Yeah, it's only 2 wind cards. It's ancient knowledge in my mind, but I knew it was 4 cards.
So,
cards,
2 to 2.5 to 3.5 with 2 cards left.
Oh dear.
Here we go, boys. From 1 to 3.5. Here we go. We're in new. We got not the old bullshit that Brandon knows intimately.
Here we go. Altea, Nation of the Dark Magics.
I was up before you even finished.
I think Ryan. Ryan gets second dibs. I think Brandon has first dibs.
As soon as it's Altea, the only card that has Altea is the first fucking name I know.
Brandon gets the first choice at it. Go ahead, Brandon.
So it's an addition that says you don't pay mana for the first chant you play each turn, but the mana cost I believe is blue and 7.
Ryan, would you like to try to steal half a point?
Yeah, it's blue and 6.
Yeah, you're right.
That is correct.
Damn it.
Whew.
So half a point to Ryan, sitting at 3.
Yeah.
And a point to
I'm 2.5, aren't I?
2.5, and Brandon's at 4. Oh, Brandon doesn't win.
I thought
Brandon's
it was
gonna win.
I could be wrong. You can tell me I'm at 3.
I think you're a 3. I think you're a 3.
I've
Brandon's
been
point.
writing it down, but I couldn't be wrong.
Here we go. Last card. Great Holy Ceiling Wave. Ryan Miles.
2 green. Put target resonator with total cost 2 or less on the bottom of its opponent's deck, and if you torrented this card, it can be total cost 4 or less.
That is 100% correct. Therefore, tying Ryan and Brandon. Frank Klosser, you are the tiebreaker now. I need you to go find a card right now.
Do
I'm
me
at
good,
least-
Frank. Do me good.
I'm at least 35% sure that I was only at 2.5. I could be wrong.
Well,
I mean,
if I'm wrong, then whatever.
I got
extreme will
it.
let us know.
Here we go. Here we go. Last card. Tiebreaker card. Let's go.
Okay, yeah.
Wait, we
Okay,
can actually
the
figure this out. If we total up all of our points, we can know if there's a point missing.
So
It's 10.5 total.
the card is
Whatever.
Book of Genesis.
Oh,
I saw
jeez. That
Brandon
was.
first.
Oh, jeez.
It's white, and 2 for an addition that says at the beginning of your turn, put a creation counter on this and search your deck for an addition or resonator with total cost equal to the number of creation counters or less than if it has 6 or less.
Ryan, do you want to steal?
It's the beginning of your main phase, not the beginning of your turn.
That's not the most relevant thing. Brandon's closer. It doesn't find additions.
Really?
I knew that. I didn't know he said that. Fuck.
Yeah, it's a resonator equaling the total cost of creation.
it's only
counters on this
resonators.
card.
We've gotta
Brandon
do it.
Bremont!
Well, no, I can't accept that. I was
Okay. Run it back, Frank. Run it back.
Oh, we're doubling down, huh?
He's
Run it
just,
back.
he's just going into relevant epic stories cards. I like.
No, I played that one in a bunch of formats.
Also, that card was before I played, so that's cheating.
That is true, but it is a very relevant card in epic
Fine.
story, so it counts.
Has to be starting in Lapis Cluster.
Here we go. Now that one's unfair because I made Brandon play against it a ton of times.
God, I don't know these.
I was about to make him give me the. I was about to make you give
Ooh,
me.
pick a Vingolf
the
2
bonus.
card.
Don't do that. I gave you Ragnite Gas, and I thought I was being clever, and you
I
just owned
slammed
my
that
ass.
down.
Oh no, we got a good one.
All
Here
right.
we go.
This is a pretty simple one, and I know I've heard your brother specifically reference this, Ryan. So, which of you can tell me what the Hammer of the Valkyrie is?
Stop.
He's so fast, I can't beat them.
I
He's
know.
got those young reflexes. Jesus.
Hold on. Say that again, Brandon.
Black 2 for destroy target J resonator.
Give me more.
What kind of card is
Ryan
it?
gets a steal.
Oh, it's a chant? Is that what you're looking for?
Ryan.
Ryan?
Quick ass!
Yeah, I mean, as a spell chant instant, like,
Yeah.
I'm
Run it
gonna
back!
give that to Bremont every time. I'm gonna
Run
give it
it
to
back.
Bremont every time.
Oh, Ryan concedes. Ryan concedes.
concede
Brandon,
that
you
one.
won!
I'm still
Brandon,
pretty
you
sure
won!
that I'm down half a point. I don't even deserve
It
this
doesn't matter.
tiebreaker.
Brandon won
On
in the
my
end
own.
anyway. So,
Yeah.
Brandon, you will get to be our host for next week, which means that you can pick cards all the way back from the beginning of the game. Hooray! So,
Oh, yeah, please don't pick original Valhalla. They're so badly written.
Never, no,
In the
no,
US,
I-
in the
I-
US.
I don't know
In the
original
US.
Valhalla. You
Yeah,
have
no,
to
okay,
pick
correct.
us.
I
The
mean,
English
yeah.
translations are so bad.
in the US.
I'm gonna
Okay.
look at, like buzzer websites and stuff, so we can do like better than this hand thing. But we're gonna be great.
But that was another fun round, nice and close like it should always be. This has been a great discussion. Super huge thanks to you guys in the chat for joining us. Please, if you want to continue supporting the channel and what we do here, help us get these even better, go ahead and check out all the links in the description for how you can support the channel. Patreon, Spreadshirt, Inked Gaming with the official playmat. And we'll be back next week with more discussion where we will be talking all about, the entire episode will be all about expected value, EV, what it means, why it's important, and how you can take it from card gaming and out into the real world. So, until next time, this has been myself, DMO73, and I have been joined as always by the wonderful Ryan Miles, the fantastic Brandon Bremont.
I just realized we didn't do an intro.
We didn't.
I wasn't here, that's why.
Yeah, fantastic Brandon Bremont. And the amazing Frank Klosser. And we will see you all next week. Have a good one,
Good night.
everybody.